have workspaces that cover everything from iOS, Windows, and Android. And Android itself poses a peculiar challenge, right? So this is, this is a chart from about 2 years ago, the Android fragmentation. How many of you seen this? It's mind-boggling, right? The amount of devices, you think Android is one OS. No, it's actually about 20 different OSs. One from LG, one from Samsung, one from HTC. They all have their own peculiar flavor of Android. Now, to Google's strength, it provides a base, very workable system that every OEM can then customize and bring their unique differentiators to it. But it brings a lot of challenges. So, how does Google look at this problem, right? When they figure out that they've captured a bulk of the consumer space, the next space is how do we make this manageable for enterprises? So that's when we look at the enterprise deployment. So when we look at the deployment, and this is how Google looks at it as well, we look at the scale from the BYOD devices to the corporate liable devices. So starting from the left, on the personal space, we have people who want to access corporate information on their own networks with their own devices. So if I join a company, I've got my own phone, I've got my own computer at home, I want to be able to check my emails, I want to log into reference documents, I want to bring my own device, right? So in that case, users expect some level of permission to get into the corporate network, but you don't want to let the company, control everything and see everything I use on my PC, right? I'd be really bummed if, I log in to check my email and suddenly, they find out that my son's been playing Angry Birds on my PC and, doing all sorts of weird things. Then on the other side of the spectrum, we have the corporate liable devices, the devices that you as an enterprise are purchasing for your employees to use. Now, there are couple of variants of this, right? One segment is phones that you buy for your employees, but you allow them to use it to check personal stuff. Nobody likes carrying 2 phones with them, right? I carry 2 because, I just love, I've got big pockets, but most of your employees don't. Carrying 2 phones is a pain. You've got to charge it twice, one is going to be out of battery, and obviously when you leave a phone behind, that's when the phone call will come, that's really critical. So you want to have a single device that's enabled for both your corporate use and your personal use. But in this case, you as an administrator want to have complete control over the device, right? If he leaves it in a bar at night, you want to make sure that it's locked down, you can control who it connects to and on. And then right to the rightmost side of it, these are the corporate-owned single-use devices. These are the Android devices, because of its breadth of hardware, are intended for specialized use. And if you think about kiosks, been to restaurants with this automated menu ordering systems, if you've been to hospitals where they provide you with kiosks for browsing the internet and email, these are all specialized devices. I'm not expecting the user to use it for putting my own games on it, but I'm expecting these devices to be targeted for specific use. So in this breadth of deployments, Google has introduced something called Android for Work, right? Android for Work brings several features into the Android base OS so that enterprises can effectively secure their devices. So the first one is really introducing a secure Android baseline so that you don't have to worry whether this is a Samsung device or a LG device or HTC device. As part of Android, Google ensures that everybody who wants to have that Android moniker has to go through a compatibility test, right? So that's why they make sure that the Google Play apps can work in a broad range of devices and not just, work well on Samsung or LG devices. So introducing this secure layer opens the management of these devices to the enterprises. So that's really important. The second key feature of Android for Work is Google Play. Google Play is a great scalable app deployment platform. They deliver billions of apps to hundreds of billions of users. Allowing these to be used for work deployments is really critical, right? We have our own app deployment infrastructure within MobileIron, but there's no way that we can compete with a native experience, right? A native experience, Google can deliver billions of apps more efficiently and more productively than we can. The third feature is standardized management, providing you a standard set of APIs so that you can manage all these Android devices by either pushing apps to it, turning providing email support, providing certificates. That's the standard management. And a native Android experience. The native Android experience covers not just the base OS, but also some of the productivity apps that your users need to be productive. So how does this Android for Work cover the personal and the corporate Liable side? So on the personal side, what Android for Work introduces is the concept of something called a work profile. Oh, this works. The work profile here creates a container for all your work apps and all your work data to sit within this container, all right? Which is kind of separated virtually from the personal profile. So I can be having my Spotify music, the games I like, the books I read, they can be all in the personal profile. And you as an administrator really care about, if you're my user and you're trying to get hold of, my corporate email, my Salesforce accounts, I want to manage which apps are allowed to do that and which apps aren't allowed. And I have every right to know which apps you have deployed within the work profile. Okay, so this is important. This concept of a work profile turns up with the BYOD devices, right? And this badge here, the briefcase, is being used in Android to denote these are work profile apps versus a native app, okay? Next one. So on the right-hand side, you've got the corporate Liable devices. These are the devices that you own and manage as an enterprise. In this case, Android for Work allows another deployment where you put the entire device under what we call a device owner or work manage mode. So all the apps in the device are now work apps. There's no such concept of a personal app. It's all work apps. Okay, so we'll go into the next phase and see how Android for Work actually builds on this. But before that, let me give you some background on Android for Work. When was it first made available? So you might have heard Android for Work for a long time now, but actually the actual fact is Android for Work didn't really turn up in commercial devices until about a year ago, right? It was announced 2 years ago. This week we have Google I/O, right? But 2 years ago in 2014, Android for Work was actually announced at Google I/O, and it was only first released in Nexus device on November 2015. But Nexus devices are Nexus devices. Commercial devices are different. The first commercial devices with Android Lollipop and above only arrived in February, right? And as you can see, many of you are still seeing a lot of Android 4.x devices out there, but this is the trending chart, right? From February of 2015 until today, is that 40% of the devices checking into Google Play today run Android Lollipop or greater, okay? So it's been a slow train moving, right? It's like one of those big transcontinental rails with 300 cars, you got to keep accelerating, and once it gets momentum, it's going to just barrel on, right? So this is Android for Work. It's not reached majority yet, but this is the year where we expect the majority of the devices to be at least 5.0 or greater. Now, 5.0 or greater doesn't actually answer the entire Android for Work question, right? In 5.0, the Android for Work was available in Android, but it was up to the OEM to turn it on and off. So certain OEMs such as Samsung have turned Android for Work on all their devices. Others, especially for lower cost devices, they might have omitted Android for Work because of its encryption requirements. In 6.0 Marshmallow and above, all Android for Work becomes a requirement for all devices. The only devices that have an exception are really like low memory devices. We're talking about embedded Android for Work, right? Embedded Android deployments in lockdown devices. So most of the modern phones that your employees will be using, if they are Marshmallow and above, will be capable of Android for Work. Okay? So let's go to what's in it for me? What's in it for you? That's a question I always ask myself. What's in it for me? So one of the big benefits of Android for Work is that you get a baseline of security across Android. So everybody has this impression that Android is insecure, there's a lot of bugs in it, there's a lot of security holes in it. Android for Work introduces that as a base requirement. So for example, when you want to turn on Android for Work, the entire file system is required to be encrypted. Okay, so you won't have a chance where you get a phone that's left behind and somebody takes it up. They don't know the password, but they can just hook up into the RAM and then pull out the data. So it's all encrypted by default. It increases the security of BYOD devices. When your employees bring in devices and they want to access your work secure data with Android for Work, you can ensure that these devices meet the base layer of security and that you can manage what apps turn up there and what apps don't. All right? And the last part, single-use devices. Single-use devices are becoming increasingly common if you have a use for kiosk mode devices or devices that are in an unmanaged mode. Android for Work allows for that deployment. So today, what a lot of people do in other Android devices is that they purchase custom launchers. We have support for it. In Android 4.x, some of our kiosk mode support allows you to lock down the kiosk mode. But increasingly, many of these APIs are being deprecated and being moved into Android for Work. So if you have a question about kiosk, come talk to me later. I can describe how some of the APIs have moved, that we actually have a bifurcation of pre-5.0 and 5.0 and greater, where we have got to adapt to different APIs to support this. All right, so let's talk about the work profile. Okay, so the work profile was, as a reminder, a container where you can put your work stuff in. And we remember the little badge that we see. So what happens in Android for Work is once you inflate the container and you apply a profile to it, suddenly you have this set of apps, base apps that are Android for Work enabled, right? So everybody will know that these are work apps. These are not personal apps. And you have certain rights and permissions with the work app that is distinct from your personal app. So what you will notice is, for example, I'll show that in a demo later. So in a work profile, the administrator has a right to be able to push work apps into your profile. So for example, you've rolled up Box or Evernote to your enterprise, and you want people to get it. You don't want people to go log into Google Play, look for Evernote and install it. You want to make sure that it's available on their work profile from day zero. Android for Work allows you to do that. It allows you to select specific apps that you as an administrator defines that your users should have, and to be able to push this to your device. Data leakage protection. Data leakage protection is about making sure that the data in your work apps stay inside there. So in Android for Work, you're allowed to enforce policies like preventing cutting and pasting, preventing screen capture just within these apps. Okay. The third key feature is data separation. We'll see in a demo later how some of these data are different for both the work profile and the personal profile. So I can have Chrome or Drive for both my work and personal, right? It's the same app, but when I launch it in Android for Work and when I launch it in the personal profile, I get a completely different set of information. I won't be able to, from my personal profile to look into my work profile, or from my work profile to look into the personal profile. All right, so that's one of the great advantages. And the fourth one, which is actually very important for many folks who are using Android for Work to get access to productivity, is the suite of Google apps. You got Chrome, you got email, you have productivity suites. All these will be available in Android for Work. So this is the work profile where you've got a personal use and a work use, and they are kept separate. And these are some of the things you can do with it. Now, the other deployment mode that we talked about was a device owner. So what happens when, for the personal side, I'll just take it away. I'll just hide everything, This is a work device. It's only meant for work. You can have your apps on it. They're all work related. In this case, the badge icon goes away, all right? And this device is then defined as a work managed device. And with it comes additional privileges. So in the previous BYOD environment, as an administrator, you're not allowed to manage the device. You're not allowed to do things like, disable camera, disable the accounts, disable the time zone, disable the boot sequence. That's something that you can do when you own the device. When I own the device and I manage the device, I've paid for the service, I've paid for the phone. I want to be able to set things like my cell phone policies. I want to set roaming on, I want to set roaming off. I want to make sure that you can tether. I want to restrict your use of SMS. I don't want you to be SMSing. I want all communication to go via official email, for example. So the device owner mode for Android for Work allows these toggles to be available for the administrator like yourself, right? And the other third mode is lockdown. So when I can put a device into kiosk mode, I lock down all the other functionality that you can use with Android. Okay, so we're going to look through some of these user experience now, and maybe I'm going to switch over to a demo. Can y'all see this? All right. So this is a work phone and it's a BYOD phone. I've got my personal environment and I've got my work profile. All right, my personal environment, I think my son has installed Where's My Water for it. I definitely don't play that. But in my work environment, I've got my own personal Gmail, which is full of offers and other personal related stuff. And I've got my work environment with the downloads, the contacts, the Google Play Store, and Gmail. So one example is when I go to Google Play, I will get the apps that you as an administrator has allowed me to download, right? So there's no apps available now. When I click to the work apps, I'll see that there's a specific number of apps that have been approved by you as an administrator and provisioned to my phone. Gmail, Evernote, Box are part of the list of apps, right? So let's go back to this. Chrome. When I'm on Chrome, I'm allowed to visit websites, and what I'm doing in Chrome can be managed by my administrator. I can set proxy rules from here. I can set other configurations, and my history. So from here, in my work environment, I'm always looking at data sheets and PDFs, strictly work. And if I look at my history, it's all work-related stuff, right? So contrast that with the Chrome for my personal space. Oh, Entertainment Weekly. Oh, who'd have thought somebody would read that? And my history has EW Online, Yelp, Amazon. I do all sorts of stuff on my personal side. It's of no concern to my company, right? And I don't really want my company to be knowing my history. So that's something that we have a virtual separation. It's the same binary, but you have two separate workspaces, right? Gmail in Android for Work opens up to my work account, and actually I'm going to get out of that because that's my actual work account. And the downloads as well. When you download something from the browser, what applies is it's downloaded into a separate space. Okay, this is stuff I've downloaded with the browser in the work profile, and I can look in my personal profile, and I don't see it at all. Okay, so this is some of the examples of what Android for Work does in the user environment. One of the key things that we see is that the user experience is really native Android. You don't see any difference with Chrome, you don't see any difference with Gmail, you don't see any difference with the Android experience. So for users, this is great because when you buy an Android device, you really want the Android experience. You want to work with your work profile and your work data, but within a native experience. Android for Work offers that. The other key thing here is that Google Play, let me get this out of the screen. Google Play for Work allows you to manage the deployment of apps, and it provides users with a consistent place to go look for work apps, knowing that they see the familiar interface, but the information there is being approved by the IT administrator to work within the work environment. Right? So here's another example of what's available for administrators. Now, when you as an administrator define an application to be deployed in Android for Work, you can now actually manage that application. Android for Work provides a consistent interface for administrators like you to be able to control the management. So for example, this is a configuration for one of our products, Tunnel. It basically publishes a set of configurations, and this is available on our UI, but we didn't build this. We didn't know what restrictions or what configurations were available. This is pulled off from Google Play and presented to the administrator. So for example, this application allows me to specify a certificate. I can insert a certificate inside here, right? Today, in order to do this, you've got to get your application wrapped through App Connect. Then we will provide the application interfaces for you to manage this. Instead, in Android for Work, the paradigm becomes, let me do it through a standard interface where the app developer exposes a list of configurations that you as an administrator are allowed to do, right? You will see an equivalent screen for Gmail where you can specify the Gmail accounts that can be set up, you can specify the Exchange accounts that you should connect to, and you can push that configuration down to the user. And the user does not have to worry about, setting it up. I got to click through 10 different fields to make sure I copy it down the exact mail URLs and the exact port numbers that my IT administrator provides to me. No, all these apps, if it's Android for Work enabled, can be configured directly by you as an administrator and pushed down to the device. Okay, so we've seen some of the typical deployments. We have things like different configurations to protect data at rest, to protect data in transit. Android for Work supports device encryption. It supports VPN deployments. It supports a broad suite of productivity apps. It supports access through Chrome. It supports app deployment through Google Play at Work. All right. So these are some of the. I hope I've given you some idea of what Android for Work can do, both in the work and in the personal profiles. At this time, I'd like to open it for questions. Any questions? Yes. The mic is coming to you.
So for application deployment, if you're deploying
Sorry.
So for corporate and application deployment, if you're going to deploy applications from the Play Store to corporate-owned devices, if those are shared devices, do you have to have a Google account tied up to that device, or can you just push the applications to devices that don't have a Google account integrated with it?
So Android. So do I have to repeat the question if you're spoken into the mic? So the question was, if I have a device that's deployed, let me repeat that. If you have a corporate-owned device and you want to push apps to it through Google Play for Work, do you need to have a Google account configured on the device to be able to do that? Today, Android for Work requires a Google account to be configured to the device. Now, I know some of you, or many of you, have your own identity service. Google has a service that allows you to synchronize the identity service identity to Google. And you have to do the same with our MobileIron Core or cloud as well. But there are some things being worked in the background to overcome that. Come to speak to me later and I can give you some details.